At 7:12 a.m., my wife texted me. Plans have changed. You're not going on the cruise. My daughter wants her real dad. I stared at my coffee, then at the family portrait hanging above our granite kitchen counter. My face looked as surprised as I felt right now. Mira Arnell had always been direct, but this felt different, calculated. The kind of precision she used when drafting legal briefs at the downtown firm where she worked as a senior assistant. I'd seen that tone before, usually directed at opposing counsel or contractors who disappointed her. I texted back a simple thumbs-up emoji and added, "Need the storage unit code to grab my suit." She responded within seconds. 4471, Unit 23B. Perfect. Mira always kept meticulous records even when she was busy destroying our marriage. I'd been married to her for 8 years, raised Lila since she was 11, and now apparently none of that mattered because Paul Jernigan, her biological father and Mira's divorce attorney boss, had decided he wanted to play daddy. I finished my coffee slowly, savoring the bitter taste. The house felt different already, like the walls knew something had shifted. Our waterfront home in Millfield had been my pride and joy. Smart home technology, 3-car garage, basement workshop, where I'd spent countless hours teaching Lila how to use power tools. Now, it felt like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mira worked for the most successful divorce firm in the county, specializing in asset protection for wealthy clients. She'd learned all the tricks for hiding money, transferring property, and blindsiding unsuspecting spouses. What she hadn't counted on was marrying someone who actually paid attention. I opened my laptop and checked our shared calendar. The cruise departure was scheduled for tomorrow morning, a 2-week Caribbean adventure I'd booked 6 months ago to celebrate our anniversary. Mira had seemed excited about it, or at least she'd done a convincing job pretending. Now I understood why she'd been so insistent about me handling all the arrangements. My phone buzzed with a call from Tara, Mira's best friend and the neighborhood gossip queen. "Jace, honey, I just wanted to check on you," she said in that syrupy voice she used when fishing for information. "Mira mentioned there might be some changes to your travel plans." "Just a slight adjustment," I replied. "Nothing dramatic." "Well, if you need anything, you know I'm here. It's so wonderful that Lila gets to reconnect with her biological father. Paul seems like such a successful man." There it was. The whole neighborhood probably knew before I did. Mira had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, building her narrative while I remained oblivious. The devoted stepfather who just wasn't quite good enough anymore. After hanging up, I walked through our house with new eyes. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every family photo suddenly felt like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was losing. The smart home system I'd installed responded to my voice commands with mechanical obedience, unaware that its master was about to become irrelevant. I pulled up Mira's laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter, probably rushing to pack for her romantic getaway. Her email was still logged in, a security oversight that would have horrified her if she'd realized. I scrolled through recent messages and found exactly what I expected. Email thread with Paul Jernigan, dated 3 weeks ago. "The timing needs to be perfect. Make sure he's completely committed to the cruise before we spring this. Lila is on board. She's excited about the college fund you promised." Another message from last week. "I've moved the important documents to the safety deposit box. He won't think to check there until it's too late." And the most recent, sent this morning. "It's done. He took it better than expected. See you at the marina." I closed the laptop and smiled for the first time that morning. Mira had always been thorough, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was as naive as the other husbands who'd stumbled through her firm's offices, shell-shocked and unprepared. What she didn't know was that I'd been in the property development business for 15 years. I'd navigated hostile takeovers, dealt with corrupt city officials, and outmaneuvered competitors who thought a guy from the wrong side of town would be easy prey. I'd learned to read contracts, protect assets, and always have an exit strategy. More importantly, I'd learned to recognize when someone was setting me up. I opened my own laptop and began making calls, first to my lawyer, then to my banker, then to my old military buddy Russ, who owned the most reliable towing company in 3 counties. By 9:30, the machinery was in motion. The house sale had been my insurance policy, arranged months ago when Mira's behavior first started changing. The buyer, a cash investor I'd worked with before, had been pre-approved and waiting for my signal. The power of sale clause was entirely legal, properly notarized, and completely binding. Mira's name wasn't on the deed, another detail she'd overlooked in her rush to plan my humiliation. By 10:30, I was signing transfer documents in my lawyer's office, while Mira was probably sipping champagne with Paul somewhere downtown, celebrating their victory. The house would be empty by evening, and the new owners would take possession tomorrow morning. I forwarded our mail to a post office box, updated my address with the bank, and terminated all the utility accounts. The smart home system would reset to factory defaults at midnight, erasing every voice command and personal setting. Even the garage door openers would stop working. My phone kept buzzing with messages from neighbors and mutual friends, all expressing concern about the situation. Mrs. Felton from across the street had apparently been watching from her window all morning, probably taking notes for her next gossip session at the country club. I ignored them all and focused on the task at hand. This wasn't about anger or revenge, it was about precision. Mira had planned her exit strategy with surgical care, so I'd respond with equal attention to detail. The storage unit was my next stop. Unit 23B contained exactly what I'd expected: old photo albums, seasonal decorations, and boxes of Lila's childhood artwork. I added my own contribution, carefully labeled boxes containing every personal item that belonged to Mira or Lila. Clothes, jewelry, books, electronics, even the expensive perfume collection Mira had accumulated over the years. Everything was organized, inventoried, and ready for pickup. I left a note with the facility manager. These items belong to Mira and Lila Arnell. They'll be collecting them soon. By noon, I was boarding the southbound train with a single suitcase and my laptop bag. I'd canceled the cruise, closed our joint accounts, and activated the forwarding protocols I'd established with my attorney. Every loose end was tied up, every bridge was burning exactly as planned. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. I archived them without reading and settled into my seat. The train pulled away from Millfield Station just as my phone rang again, Mira's ringtone, the one she'd programmed herself months ago when things were still good between us. I let it go to voicemail and watched the familiar landmarks disappear outside my window. The itinerary ended wherever I chose, and for the first time in months, that choice was entirely mine. The train carried me south toward Atlantic City, where I'd booked a room at a modest motel near the causeway. Nothing fancy, just clean sheets and reliable Wi-Fi. I needed time to think and plan my next moves, while Mira and Paul discovered their carefully orchestrated surprise had gone sideways. I checked into the Seaside Inn under my own name, no point in hiding. This wasn't about disappearing, it was about controlling the narrative. The room was basic but functional, with a view of the inlet and enough space to spread out my documents. My laptop showed the shared iCloud account was still active. Mira had never bothered to remove me from family sharing, another oversight that would cost her. I could see her location, her photos, even her recent app activity. Right now, she was at Chez Laurent, the most expensive French restaurant in Millfield. Lunch with Paul, no doubt celebrating their successful manipulation. I ordered room service and opened my laptop to monitor the situation. The first wave of panic would hit when they returned to find the house locked and empty. The second wave would come when Mira realized I'd cleaned out the joint accounts before she could freeze them. My phone buzzed with a text from Russ. Package delivered. House is empty. New locks installed. You want me to stick around? I replied, thanks. Head home. This is just the beginning. Russ had been my sergeant in Afghanistan, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think we could save the world. Now he ran a successful towing business and asked no questions when old friends needed favors. His crew had moved everything out of the house in 4 hours, leaving only the furniture that came with the property. Around 3 p.m., my phone exploded with activity. Mira's first call came at 3:17, followed immediately by a text. "What did you do? The house won't recognize my key." I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. "Jace, this is ridiculous. Whatever game you're playing, it stops now. Call me back immediately." The next call was from Paul. I answered on the 4th ring. "Arnell, what the hell is going on?" His voice carried that entitled tone I'd heard during the few times we'd met at firm parties. "Mira can't get into her own house." "Not her house," I said calmly. "Never was. Check the deed. Don't get cute with me. I'm an attorney, and I know exactly what kind of trouble you're looking at here." "So am I, Paul. Real estate law, property rights, asset protection. Learned it all from the best. Your firm, actually. Mira brought home some fascinating reading material over the years." There was a pause. I could practically hear him recalculating. "Look, we can work this out reasonably. No need for anyone to get hurt." "Nobody's getting hurt," I agreed. "Just educated. Mira wanted to teach me about consequences. Consider this my graduate course." I hung up and turned off my phone. They'd figure out the rest soon enough. The next morning, I drove back to Millfield in my rental car. I wanted to see the aftermath firsthand, maybe grab breakfast at Murphy's Diner where half the town gathered to share gossip. The other half would be at the country club, but Murphy's was where the real information flowed. Mrs. Felton was in the parking lot when I arrived, practically vibrating with excitement. "Jace, dear, I'm so sorry about your troubles," she said, rushing over with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found the social event of the season. Such a shock, seeing all those moving trucks yesterday, and poor Mira, standing on the lawn with her suitcases, looking so confused. "Life's full of surprises," I replied. She seemed to think there was some mistake with the locks. Had to call a locksmith, but he couldn't help her. Said the system had been completely reset. I nodded sympathetically. Technology can be tricky. Inside Murphy's, the conversation stopped when I walked in. Every head turned, every voice dropped to a whisper. I ordered coffee and eggs at the counter, acting like nothing unusual had happened. "Heard you and Mira had some excitement yesterday," said Pete Murphy, the owner. He'd been running the diner for 30 years and knew everyone's business. "Just some changes to our travel plans," I said. "Nothing dramatic." "That's not what I heard from Tara. She was in here this morning saying Mira's been trying to reach you all night. Something about the house being sold." Mira's always been prone to exaggeration. My phone buzzed with a call from Lieutenant Gina Park, Millfield PD. I'd served with her brother overseas, and she'd always been fair in her dealings with local contractors. "Jace, I need to ask you a few questions. Mira Arnell filed a complaint this morning. Says you stole property and locked her out of her residence." "Happy to help, Lieutenant. When would be convenient?" "How about now? I'm in the parking lot." I paid my check and walked outside. Lieutenant Park was leaning against her patrol car, looking more curious than concerned. "So, what's the real story here?" she asked. I handed her a folder containing copies of the deed, the sale contract, and the legal transfer documents. "Property sale, all above board. My attorney can verify everything." She flipped through the papers, nodded. "Looks legitimate. What about the personal property Mira mentioned?" "Everything that belongs to her and Lila is in storage unit 23B at Secure Space. They have the code." "And the joint bank accounts?" "Closed yesterday morning. My half went to my personal account. Her half went to an account in her name. She should have received notification from the bank." Lieutenant Park smiled slightly. "You've been planning this." "I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." "Any chance you two can work this out without involving the department?" "That's entirely up to Mira and her attorney friend." She handed back the folder. Stay available, but I don't see any crimes here. Just a very messy divorce. I spent the rest of the morning driving around town, letting myself be seen. I stopped at the hardware store, the bank, even the grocery store where Mira usually shopped. Word would spread that I was calm, visible, and completely unbothered by the chaos I'd created. Around noon, I parked across from Paul's office building downtown. His BMW was in its reserved spot, pristine and expensive. Paul had always been proud of that car, washing it every weekend and parking it away from other vehicles to avoid scratches. I called Russ. Remember that favor you owe me? I need something delivered. What kind of delivery? The kind that teaches lessons about respect. That evening, I returned to my motel room and finally turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, and 14 voicemails. I scrolled through them, watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. Mira's messages told the story. Call me now. Then, this is insane, Jace. You can't just disappear. Then, please, we need to talk. Lila is upset. And finally, I know you're getting these messages. This isn't over. Paul's messages were more direct. You're making a serious mistake. Then, my firm will destroy you in court. And finally, answer your phone, you coward. I deleted them all and ordered pizza. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was content to watch the sunset over the inlet and plan my next move. Mira had wanted to play chess with someone she thought was still learning checkers. She was about to discover how wrong she'd been. The next morning brought news that Paul's BMW had been found in the Murphy's Diner parking lot, covered in what appeared to be fish guts and surrounded by seagulls. Someone had apparently broken a bag of bait in his air conditioning intake, creating a smell that would take weeks to eliminate. I learned this from Mrs. Felton, who called me at 8 a.m. with barely contained glee. Such a shame about Mr. Jernigan's car, she said. I heard he had to take a taxi to work this morning. The smell was just overwhelming. Vandalism is terrible, I agreed. I hope they catch whoever did it. Oh, I'm sure it was just teenagers. You know how they are with expensive cars. I drove back to Millfield for the Saturday farmers market, knowing Mira and Paul would likely be there. The market was Mira's favorite weekend ritual, a chance to see and be seen while buying overpriced organic vegetables. She'd want to maintain appearances, show the town that she was handling the situation with grace and dignity. I was right. They were at the coffee stand when I arrived, Mira in her designer sunglasses and Paul looking uncomfortable in casual clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lila was with them, looking confused and unhappy. I approached slowly, giving them time to see me coming. Conversations around us gradually stopped as people noticed the tension. Morning, Mira. Paul. I nodded politely. Lila, how are you holding up? Lila looked at her mother uncertainly. I'm okay, I guess. This is all really confusing. Change usually is, I said, but sometimes it's necessary. Paul stepped forward, trying to assert authority. We need to talk, Arnell. Privately. Nothing private about any of this, I replied loudly enough for nearby shoppers to hear. You wanted Lila to know her real father. Here you are. Don't make a scene, Mira hissed. I'm not making anything, just acknowledging reality. I turned to the growing crowd of onlookers. Paul here is a successful divorce attorney, specializes in helping people navigate complex family situations. Paul's face was turning red. That's enough. Is it? Because I thought we were being honest now. About relationships, about families, about who belongs where. You're out of line, Paul said, moving closer. I didn't back down. Funny thing about lines, Paul. I spent 8 years thinking I knew where they were. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. That's when Paul made his mistake. He grabbed my arm, trying to force me to step away. In front of 30 witnesses, including Mrs. Felton, who was recording everything on her phone, he put his hands on me first. My response was purely defensive. A simple arm twist that sent Paul stumbling backward into the coffee cart. He landed hard, spilling drinks and pastries everywhere. Nothing violent, nothing criminal, just physics and leverage applied by someone who'd learned close-quarters combat in the army. The crowd gasped. Paul scrambled to his feet, his expensive polo shirt stained with coffee and his dignity thoroughly bruised. "You'll pay for this," he snarled. "For what? You grabbed me, I moved away. Ask anyone here." Mrs. Felton was already uploading the video to social media. Within hours, it would be all over town. Successful attorney Paul Jernigan getting humiliated by the man whose wife he'd stolen. Mira was mortified. "Jace, please, this doesn't have to be ugly." "You're right," I said. "It doesn't. But that was your choice to make, and you made it 3 weeks ago when you started planning this with Paul." Lila looked shocked. 3 weeks ago? But you said— "Your mother said a lot of things," I interrupted gently. "Maybe it's time you asked her which ones were true." I walked away, leaving them to deal with the stares and whispers of half the town. My phone was buzzing with notifications. Mrs. Felton's video was already being shared and commented on. Public opinion was shifting, and not in their favor. That afternoon, I received a call from Tom Cartwright, the senior partner at Paul's law firm. "Mr. Arnell, I think we should meet. There seems to be some confusion about recent events." "No confusion on my end, Mr. Cartwright. Everything's crystal clear." "Nevertheless, I'd appreciate a conversation. Professional courtesy." We met at his office, a sterile corporate space designed to intimidate clients and impress competitors. Cartwright was old-school legal establishment, the kind of lawyer who'd built his reputation on discretion and damage control. "Paul tells me there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he began. "Paul's been having a lot of misunderstandings lately. Misunderstood the ownership of my house, misunderstood the status of my marriage, misunderstood his ability to intimidate me in public." Cartwright leaned back in his chair. "You're angry. I understand that. But destroying careers won't bring your wife back." "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "Just letting natural consequences play out. Paul chose to mix business with pleasure. That was his decision. The firm has a reputation to protect. So do I. The difference is, I haven't done anything that needs protecting." I left him with copies of the email exchanges I'd found on Mira's laptop, the ones detailing their 3-week planning process. By Monday morning, Paul would be facing an ethics review, and Mira would be looking for a new job. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where Mira and Paul had celebrated their victory 2 days earlier. The maitre d' recognized me and seemed surprised to see me alone. "Will Mrs. Arnell be joining you this evening?" "Mrs. Arnell has other plans," I said. "Table for one, please." I ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu and toasted my reflection in the window. Outside, Millfield was settling into its Saturday evening routine, but inside the restaurant, I could feel the weight of curious stares from other diners. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Can we talk? This is all really messed up." I replied, "Anytime you want. I'm not the one who changed the rules." Another message, this one from Mira. "You're destroying everything we built together." I typed back, "You destroyed it 3 weeks ago. I'm just cleaning up the debris." The wine was excellent, the food was perfect, and for the first time since this started, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Mira had wanted to teach me about consequences and choices. The education was proceeding exactly as planned, just not the way she'd intended. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was content to enjoy my expensive dinner and watch the town gossip network process the day's events. By morning, everyone in Millfield would know that Paul Jernigan had been outmaneuvered by the man he'd tried to humiliate. The best part was, I was just getting started. Sunday morning brought a call from Russ, who sounded amused and slightly concerned. "You might want to check the news," he said. "Your little performance yesterday made the local paper's website." I pulled up the Millfield Gazette online and found a photo of Paul stumbling backward into the coffee cart with the headline, "Local Attorney Involved in Market Altercation." The article was carefully neutral, but the comments section told the real story. Half the town was taking sides, and the division wasn't going the way Mira had planned. "Jernigan always was arrogant," wrote one commenter. "About time someone knocked him down a peg." Another added, "Feel sorry for Jace Arnell. Guy raised that girl for 8 years and gets thrown away like trash." But there were defenders too. Two sides to every story. Maybe Jace wasn't the perfect husband everyone thinks. I closed the laptop and drove to Secure Space Storage Facility. The weekend manager told me Mira and Lila had come by yesterday evening to collect their belongings. "They seemed pretty upset," he said. "The daughter was crying, and the mother kept asking if you'd left any messages." "Did they take everything?" "Most of it. Left some boxes behind, said they'd be back for them later." I checked Unit 23B and found exactly what I'd expected. Mira had taken the essentials, clothes, jewelry, important documents, but left behind anything that reminded her of our life together. Photo albums, vacation souvenirs, the handmade pottery Lila had given me for Father's Day 3 years ago. She was trying to erase the past, but she'd made a tactical error. Those abandoned items told a story about our relationship that contradicted her narrative of an unhappy marriage to an inadequate man. I loaded the remaining boxes into my rental car and drove to Lila's dorm at the State University, 40 minutes away. She'd texted me her room number, along with a message that she wanted to hear my side of the story. The campus was quiet on Sunday afternoon, most students either studying or sleeping off Saturday night's activities. I found Lila's building and called from the parking lot. "I'm downstairs," I said when she answered. "Mom told me not to talk to you." "Since when do you do everything your mother tells you?" There was a pause, then, "I'll be right down." Lila appeared 5 minutes later, looking older than her 19 years. College had been good for her. She was more confident, more independent than the uncertain teenager I'd helped raise. "This is really messed up, Jace," she said, settling into the passenger seat. "Yeah, it is. But not for the reasons your mother told you." I showed her the email exchanges I'd found on Mira's laptop, watching her expression change from confusion to anger to something that looked like relief. 3 weeks, she said finally. "She was planning this for 3 weeks and didn't tell me. She told you what she needed you to believe. That's different. But why? I mean, Paul's my biological father, but you're the one who taught me to drive, helped with homework, came to every school play and soccer game. Ask your mother. She's the one who decided 8 years wasn't enough." Lila was quiet for a long time, staring out at the campus quad where other students were enjoying their normal Sunday afternoon dramas. "Paul promised to pay for graduate school," she said finally. "Said he wanted to make up for lost time, be a real father to me. And what did he want in return? For me to support Mom's decision, to say I was excited about getting to know him better." I handed her one of the abandoned photo albums. "Look through this and tell me if it looks like you needed a better father." She flipped through pages of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, school events. Every major moment of her teenage years was documented, and I was in most of the pictures. "You were there for everything," she said quietly. "I was there because I wanted to be. Not because anyone paid me or pressured me or made it worth my while. Mom said you agreed to the divorce, that you understood why she needed to make this change. Your mother said a lot of things. How many of them match what you see in those pictures?" Lila closed the album and wiped her eyes. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe what you saw and experienced. Everything else is just noise." I left her with the photo albums and a promise to answer any questions she had. The drive back to Millfield gave me time to plan my next moves. Mira had counted on Lila's support to legitimize her actions, but that foundation was cracking. My phone rang as I reached the town limits. Paul's number. "We need to end this," he said without preamble. "It's getting out of hand." "I'm not doing anything, Paul. Just living my life and letting other people make their own choices. The firm is asking questions. Cartwright wants me to take a leave of absence until this blows over." "Sounds like a personal problem. Mira's job is in jeopardy too. They're calling it a conflict of interest, having her work on cases while she's personally involved with a partner." "Again, not my problem. You two created this situation. What do you want? Money? Property? Just name your price and let's settle this." I laughed. "You think this is about money? Paul, you have no idea what this is about." "Then tell me." "It's about consequences. You wanted to play house with another man's wife and daughter. Now you get to live with the results." I hung up and drove to Murphy's Diner for Sunday dinner. The place was packed with the after-church crowd, and conversations stopped when I walked in. I took a seat at the counter and ordered the pot roast special. "Heard you had some excitement at the market yesterday," Pete Murphy said, refilling my coffee. "Just a misunderstanding." "That's not what I heard. Heard Paul Jernigan tried to push you around and got schooled instead." "People see what they want to see." "Maybe. But I've known you for 8 years, Jace. You're not the type to start trouble." "No," I agreed. "But I'm definitely the type to finish it." The dinner crowd was buzzing with conversation about yesterday's incident, Paul's car troubles, and speculation about what would happen next. I ate slowly, listening to the town process the story and choose sides. Mrs. Felton was holding court at a corner table, showing her video to anyone who'd watch. "Poor Jace," she was saying. 8 years of marriage, and this is how they treat him." At another table, Tara was defending Mira. "People grow apart. Sometimes you have to make hard choices for your family's future." But the majority seemed to be leaning my way. Millfield was a small town with traditional values, and abandoning a devoted stepfather for a richer alternative didn't sit well with most residents. I paid my check and walked out into the evening air. Tomorrow would bring new developments, Paul's suspension, Mira's job troubles, and whatever consequences flowed from Lila's growing doubts about her mother's version of events. The game was far from over, but the momentum was shifting. Mira had counted on quick, decisive action to present everyone with a fait accompli. Instead, she was discovering that some people fight back when cornered, and I was just getting warmed up. Monday morning brought confirmation that Paul's leave of absence was now official. The Millfield Gazette ran a brief item about personnel changes at Cartwright and Associates, carefully worded to avoid libel, but clear enough for anyone following the story. I was having breakfast at my motel when Lila called. "I talked to Mom last night," she said. "She's really angry with you." "I imagine she is." "What did she say?" "That you're trying to turn me against her, that you're being vindictive and cruel." "What do you think?" "I think she's scared. I've never seen her like this before. She's always been so in control of everything." "Control is an illusion, Lila. Your mother's discovering that the hard way. She wants to meet with you, says there are things you don't understand about her relationship with Paul. I understand plenty, but I'm willing to listen if she wants to talk." We arranged to meet that evening at Riverside Park, neutral ground away from the gossip network. I spent the day driving around Millfield, observing the aftermath of my weekend activities. Paul's BMW was at the dealership, presumably being cleaned and deodorized. I stopped by and chatted with Mike, the service manager. "Worst case I've ever seen," he said, shaking his head. "Someone really did a number on that car. Fish guts in the vents, the smell had penetrated everything. We might have to replace the entire HVAC system." "Expensive repair?" "Could run $3,000–4,000, and that's if we can get the smell out of the upholstery." I made sympathetic noises and drove on. Paul was learning that actions have consequences, even for successful attorneys who thought they were untouchable. That afternoon, I received a call from Tom Cartwright. "Paul's told me about your conversation yesterday," he said. "I think you're being unreasonable." "How so?" "He made a mistake. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean you have to destroy his career over it." "I'm not destroying anything, Mr. Cartwright. I'm just not helping him avoid the natural consequences of his choices. The firm is prepared to make a generous offer to resolve this situation." "What kind of offer?" "Compensation for your inconvenience. A settlement that would allow everyone to move forward with dignity." "You want to pay me to go away quietly?" "I want to find a solution that works for everyone involved." "Here's a solution. Paul stops mixing business with pleasure. Mira finds a new job, and they both learn to live with the choices they made. No payment required." I hung up and continued my tour of Millfield. The town was processing the scandal with typical small-town intensity. Everyone had an opinion, and most people weren't shy about sharing it. At the grocery store, the checkout clerk asked if I was holding up okay through all this drama. At the bank, the teller mentioned that some people had been asking about my financial situation. Even the mailman had an opinion about what that lawyer did to you. Public sentiment was clearly running in my favor, which meant Mira and Paul were facing social pressure along with their professional troubles. In a town like Millfield, reputation mattered more than money, and theirs was crumbling fast. Evening came, and I drove to Riverside Park for my meeting with Mira. She was waiting by the gazebo, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. The designer clothes and perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress she was under. "Thank you for coming," she said as I approached. "Lila asked me to listen, so I'm listening." This got out of hand. I never intended for things to go this far. "What did you intend?" "A clean break. A chance for Lila to know her real father, for me to build something new with Paul." "And what about me in this clean break?" She looked away. "I thought you'd understand. That you'd want what was best for Lila." "I do want what's best for Lila. That's why I'm not going away quietly while you rewrite history to make yourself feel better. Paul can give her opportunities you never could. Graduate school, connections, a real future. I gave her 8 years of real fatherhood. Apparently, that's not worth much in your accounting." Mira's composure cracked slightly. "You're being impossible. Paul's career is ruined. I'm probably going to lose my job. And for what? Because your feelings got hurt?" "My feelings," I laughed. "Mira, this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about you learning that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're smarter than everyone else." "So what do you want? How do we end this?" "We don't end anything. You started something 3 weeks ago when you decided to plan my humiliation. Now you get to live with the results. That's not fair." "Fair?" I stared at her. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to plan this behind my back for 3 weeks? Was it fair to use Lila as leverage? Was it fair to assume I'd just disappear quietly when you were done with me?" She had no answer for that. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to live with the choices you made. Paul's going to live with his choices. And Lila's going to decide for herself what kind of relationship she wants with all of us. And you? What are you going to do?" "Whatever I want. That's the beauty of being a free man with nothing left to lose." I walked away, leaving her sitting alone in the gathering darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Russ. "Heard through the grapevine that Paul's been asking around about you. Wants to know about your military service, your business connections. Thought you should know." Interesting. Paul was trying to find leverage, something he could use to pressure me into backing down. That meant he was getting desperate, which made him dangerous in unpredictable ways. I drove back to my motel and spent the evening researching Paul's background. If he wanted to play investigator, I could play that game too. By midnight, I had a comprehensive file on Paul Jernigan's career, finances, and personal history. The man had enemies, disgruntled clients, professional rivals, an ex-wife who'd left town after a messy divorce. He also had secrets, the kind that successful men accumulate when they think they're untouchable. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to test Paul's commitment to his new family responsibilities. Mira wanted a clean break and a fresh start, but she was about to discover that some breaks are messier than others. The hunt was just beginning. Tuesday brought news that Mira had been suspended from her job pending an internal review of her relationship with Paul. The rumor mill was working overtime, and not in her favor. By noon, half the town knew that she'd been planning her husband's humiliation for weeks, while pretending everything was normal. I was at Murphy's diner when Tara burst in, looking frazzled and desperate. "Jace, you have to stop this," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Mira's falling apart. She barely slept last night. That sounds like a personal problem. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean you have to destroy her life over it." "I'm not destroying anything, just letting natural consequences play out." "That's what you keep saying, but you're enjoying this. Don't pretend you're not." I set down my coffee and looked at her directly. "You want to know what I'm enjoying, Tara? I'm enjoying watching someone who thought she was smarter than everyone else discover that she's not. I'm enjoying watching a plan that was supposed to humiliate me backfire spectacularly. So this is about revenge. This is about justice. There's a difference." Tara left without ordering, probably rushing back to report our conversation to Mira. That was fine with me. I wanted them to know that I wasn't backing down, wasn't going to be reasonable or forgiving or any of the other things they expected from the man they'd tried to discard. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my motel. Ben Arnell, my younger brother, knocked on my door carrying a duffel bag and wearing his usual troublemaker grin. "Heard you were having some fun without me," he said. Ben was 2 years younger and had followed a different path after the military. Where I'd gone into legitimate business, he'd stayed closer to the edge. Private security, debt collection, the kind of work that paid well and didn't ask too many questions. "What are you doing here?" "Russ called me, said you might need backup for whatever you're planning next." "I'm not planning anything." "Sure you're not. That's why you're living in a motel and your wife's lawyer boyfriend is asking around about your background." I let him in and brought him up to speed on the situation. Ben listened with growing amusement, occasionally laughing at the more outrageous details. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. "Your wife planned to dump you for 3 weeks, thought she had everything figured out, and now she's unemployed and hiding from the neighbors? That's about the size of it. And the lawyer who was supposed to be her knight in shining armor is suspended from his firm and driving around in a car that smells like rotting seafood?" "Pretty much," Ben grinned. "I like it. But you're thinking too small." "How so?" "You're playing defense, reacting to what they did, making them pay for their mistakes. That's fine, but it's not enough." "What do you suggest?" "Offense. Make them come to you on your terms, when you're ready, where you have all the advantages." We spent the evening planning what Ben called the end game. It was ambitious, risky, and completely unnecessary from a legal standpoint. But it would be satisfying in ways that simply walking away could never match. Wednesday morning, I called Paul's office and left a message with his secretary. "Tell Mr. Jernigan that I'm ready to discuss a settlement. Tonight at 8 p.m., Seaside Motel, room 237. Then I called Mira and left a similar message. "If you want to end this, we can talk tonight. Seaside Motel, room 237, 8 p.m. The Seaside Motel was perfect for what I had in mind. Cheap, anonymous, and equipped with the kind of thin walls that made private conversations impossible. I rented the room next door under Ben's name and spent the afternoon setting up our equipment. Nothing illegal or invasive, just a simple recording setup that would capture whatever happened in room 237. If Paul and Mira wanted to threaten me, offer bribes, or reveal more details about their 3-week conspiracy, I wanted it documented. At 7:45, I was in position in room 237 when Paul arrived. He looked haggard, like a man who hadn't slept well in days. His expensive clothes couldn't hide the stress he was under. "Where's Mira?" I asked. She'll be here. We need to settle this tonight. I'm listening. The firm is prepared to offer you $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear quietly. 50,000? That's insulting. It's a generous offer for someone in your position. What position is that? Unemployed, divorced, living in a motel? How long do you think you can keep this up? Mira arrived before I could answer, looking as desperate as Paul. They sat across from me on the motel room's single chair and small desk, a united front trying to project confidence they didn't feel. We want to make a deal, Mira said. I'm listening. Paul will pay for Lila's education, all of it. Graduate school, whatever she wants. In return, you sign papers agreeing to stay out of our lives. And what do you bring to this negotiation, Mira? I'll make sure Lila understands that this was my choice, not yours, that you were a good stepfather who deserves respect. How generous of you to acknowledge 8 years of fatherhood. Paul leaned forward. Look, we all made mistakes here. But dragging this out doesn't help anyone. What mistakes did I make, Paul? You married a woman who wasn't really committed to the relationship. That's not your fault, but it's reality. Interesting theory. What else? You're fighting a battle you can't win. Mira wants to be with me. Lila wants to know her real father, and you're just making yourself look desperate by refusing to accept it. That's when I played my ace. Tell me about the 3-week planning process. They exchanged glances, suddenly wary. What planning process? Mira asked. The one documented in your emails, the one where you discuss timing, strategy, and how to manipulate Lila into supporting your decision. Paul's face went pale. You hacked her email? I read emails on a laptop she left open in our kitchen. Amazing what people will put in writing when they think they're smarter than everyone else. That's invasion of privacy, Paul said. That's evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Emotional fraud, but fraud nonetheless. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to share what I found with the right people. Your ex-wife, for instance. I bet she'd be interested to know about your pattern of behavior with married women. Paul stood up abruptly. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. About consequences, about choices, about what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. This is extortion. This is justice. You wanted to play games with someone you thought was helpless. Now you get to learn what happens when the game doesn't go according to your script. Mira was crying now, the composed facade finally cracking completely. What do you want from us? I want you to live with what you've done. I want Paul to explain to his partners why he's facing an ethics investigation. I want you to explain to Lila why you lied to her for 3 weeks. And then what? Then nothing. You go your way, I go mine, and we all live with the choices we made. I stood up and headed for the door. The room's paid for through tomorrow morning. Feel free to stay and discuss your next move. In the hallway, I could hear them arguing through the thin walls. Paul was blaming Mira for leaving her laptop open. Mira was blaming Paul for underestimating me, and both of them were realizing that their carefully planned future was crumbling around them. Ben was waiting in our surveillance room, grinning as he reviewed the recordings. That was beautiful, he said. They're completely panicked. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? What's Phase 2? We give them exactly what they asked for. A chance to start over, clean slate, no interference from me. That doesn't sound like much of an ending. Trust me, little brother. Sometimes the best revenge is giving people exactly what they think they want. The final act was about to begin, and this time I would be writing the script. Thursday morning, I drove back to Millfield for the last time. The town was buzzing with news that Paul had resigned from Cartwright and Associates, and Mira had been terminated from her position. The official story was mutual agreement to pursue other opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. I found Lila waiting in the parking lot of Murphy's Diner, looking more mature than I'd ever seen her. I heard about last night, she said as I approached. What did you hear? That Mom and Paul tried to buy you off. and you turned them down. Something like that. I also heard that you have evidence they've been lying to me about when this all started. I handed her a folder containing copies of the email exchanges. Judge for yourself. She read through them slowly, her expression hardening with each page. 3 weeks, she said finally. They were planning this for 3 weeks, and let me think it was a sudden decision. People lie when they think the truth won't get them what they want. Paul's been calling me, trying to explain. Says you're making things harder than they need to be. What do you think? I think I'm 19 years old and tired of being treated like a chess piece in someone else's game. We talked for an hour, sitting in my rental car and watching the town go about its morning routine. Lila asked hard questions about the marriage, about Mira's motivations, about what would happen next. Are you going to keep fighting them? She asked. I'm done fighting. They wanted me out of their lives, and that's exactly what they're going to get. What does that mean? It means I'm disappearing, Lila. New city, new business, new life. Your mother and Paul can have exactly what they asked for, a future without me in it. What about me? That's your choice. You're an adult now. You can decide who you want in your life and who you don't. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything that had happened over the past week. I want to keep in touch, she said finally. Whatever else happens, you were my dad for 8 years. That doesn't just disappear because Mom found someone with more money. I'd like that too. I gave her my new phone number and a post office box address where she could reach me. Then I drove to the storage facility one last time to collect the items Mira and Lila had left behind. The photo albums were still there, along with the pottery Lila had made me and a few other mementos of our life together. I loaded them into my car and drove away from Millfield for the final time. That evening, I was back at my motel when Paul called. You won, he said without preamble. Is that what you wanted to hear? I didn't want to win anything, Paul. I just wanted you to understand that actions have consequences. My career is over. Mira lost her job. We're both starting from scratch. Welcome to the real world, population. Everyone who's not rich enough to avoid consequences. What happens now? Now you build whatever life you can with the choices you've made, just like everyone else. I hung up and began packing my belongings. Tomorrow I would drive south to start the business I'd been planning for years, property development in a growing coastal city where nobody knew my history. My phone buzzed with a final text from Mira. I hope you're satisfied. I typed back. I'm content. There's a difference. The next morning, I checked out of the seaside inn and loaded my car for the drive south. Ben had already left, heading back to his own complicated life with a promise to visit once I was settled. As I drove through Millfield one last time, I passed the house that had been my home for 8 years. There was a "for sale" sign in the yard. Apparently, the new owners were flipping it for a quick profit. The smart home system I'd installed was probably already replaced, erasing the last traces of my presence. At the town limits, I pulled over and took one last look back. Somewhere in Millfield, Mira and Paul were learning to live with the consequences of their choices. The town gossip network would eventually move on to new scandals, but they would always be remembered as the couple who destroyed 2 careers for a romance that started with lies and manipulation. I turned south and drove toward my new life, content with the knowledge that sometimes justice doesn't require a courtroom or a judge. Sometimes it just requires patience, preparation, and the willingness to let people face the natural consequences of their actions. The cruise I'd originally planned would have lasted 2 weeks. This education in consequences had taken exactly the same amount of time. The only difference was the destination. Instead of sailing to tropical islands, we'd all navigated the treacherous waters of choice and consequence. And unlike a cruise, this trip had been one way only.